to Mr. Bob this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
You don't have to talk any faster. We just won't talk as long. How's that?
Well, obviously not, because you're still going to cut us off.
479-1160, 349-WCCS if you have a question to ask Mr. Bob today. So this weather has been really something, hasn't it?
It's been quite interesting, hasn't
Yeah.
it?
Well, the news came out earlier this week that for stink bugs and other invasive insects that aren't really used to this climate, that 90% of them that hadn't found adequate shelter for the winter had been killed because of the cold, which got me to thinking, well, yeah, if you're a stink bug worth anything, if you're even a mildly intelligent stink bug, you have found shelter by this time of the year. So what was that report telling me? It wasn't telling me anything, was it?
Yes, you have. No, it wasn't telling you much. Well, and I tried to, I heard you say that the other day, and I thought I got to follow up on that.
Yeah.
So I went back to the source, to Virginia Tech, to Mr. Kuhar, who was the person that initiated that research, Tom Kuhar. He's an entomologist there, and nothing was coming up.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I was looking under his name and under Virginia Tech press releases, news releases, all that stuff. Nothing was coming up.
Couldn't
thinking,
find
this is odd. But, I found several TV, radio sources that had articles. And then I came across one that said, a year without stink bugs. It's an enticing prospect, but unfortunately, it's not a likely one.
Yeah.
So they kind of went down through, and somehow that thing got reposted from back in 2015, 2016, and it shouldn't have been.
So that wasn't
posted.
New information at all that
it wasn't new
got
information
released this week.
No. So it's a little bit of fake news. Yeah,
kind of. And I think that probably the reason it is fake news is because of what I just said.
Yeah.
By this time of the year, they've already found their warm shelter. They're in people's homes.
So they were actually anecdotally or observationally, they would put stink bugs in boxes, insulated boxes, that were able to breathe and everything, and then they would set those outside. So they were trying to see, what the effects of the winter would be on them. They were somewhat protected, but in this case that they did report, yes, but that was back in 2015, I think, that happened, and that's when that information was collected. So there was obviously a cold snap then that killed off 95% of the 100. So there was 100 in each one of those containers that they put out, and so there were 95 of the 100 killed. So hence the 95% figure.
So yeah, it is really fake news, but it does lead to the discussion and to the question.
It does.
When you have invasive insects that are not native to your land, and a cold snap comes, or a hot spell in the middle of summer, whatever it might be, how does it affect them?
Yeah, and it does. It varies, and not all of them equally are as protected as their neighbor. Some will be, of course, inside, or some are close enough to houses or dwellings that have heat that there's just enough heat given off that it really tempers any of those cold snaps. So they're pretty well protected. They know how to do that, and they're adapted. But with an invasive species, depending on its origin, what country and area of the world that it came from, that could influence greatly that survivability rate. So if it's from a more tropical location, then yes, our winters here may just completely kill it off. Now, a lot of times, those types of insects would have laid eggs.
Well, that was the second part of that whole thing was if they've already laid their eggs, then you're still going to get them. Yeah,
and so the stink bugs overwinter as adults. So they will mate in the spring, and they will lay eggs this coming spring.
Oh, okay. So
it's the adults overwintering. So if the adults die, that's going to reduce some of the population, but there's still going to be plenty of the population that survives
for anybody who wants them.
And a lot of times it's extremes in temperature fluctuations. So a lot of big changes in weather conditions, temperatures, moisture contents that stress them. And if you have several of those, types of events that occur, then that can, because they have eaten food, and that food has to give them reserves, so they're kind of winter fat, winter store of energy, and the more they have to burn that, then the less they have, and then the greater the chance is that they could be succumb to some kind of condition over the winter.
Yeah. All right. In our few moments that we have left, I want to talk about another of the pesky things that happen over the winter, and that is that animals get after your plants because they're about the only succulent things that they can get their mouths on.
Yes.
Deer are a particular culprit. And I
Rabbits.
want to talk about that plant coming back. Of course, it's going to be dependent on what type of plant it is, but the typical Western Pennsylvania shrub that gets chewed up.
Right. So a lot of perennial plants. Sometimes they'll work on those, but those are mostly herbaceous perennials are dying back. So the top dies back, but the root system survives for multiple years, and each year we get new growth. So those are less susceptible to that kind of damage unless they really root down and dig up the base or the crown of the plant and damage that or expose it, and then that can hurt that plant because of other things, weather conditions. Perennial are woody material, and of course deer are naturally prone to eating woody buds and branches. So as long as they don't nip it back too far, and the problem we get into with arborvitaes, for example, is that they'll eat them back to the point where they don't have new buds to come out along those branches, so those bottom branches completely die, and then you don't have anything until up until above their reach. So that's more damaging on that type of plant. Rhododendrons are another one that they will just gnaw down. Now, rhododendrons do have the ability and do have some buds back inside the plant and on the branches that they can regrow. But after a while, from successive years of getting beat back and pruned heavily by the deer, for example, that they'll have branches that'll just die. So that'll affect the quality of that plant as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, of course, rabbits gnaw off things, especially smaller plants. Spirea is a smaller shrub, and rabbits will get after that and just clip the stems off. And they're a woody plant too, and so that does. Now, granted, they are multi-stemmed, so they'll send up some new branches, but they'll mow them off.
Yeah.
And so they did. So you've lost that growth that you had in previous years when they do that. But those events can stress those plants. So if they're healthy, they're going to regrow, send up new branches, and then depending on the plant and its ability to where it has buds and its ability to rebud and grow again will affect that overall quality too. But this time of year, the last couple that snows we had, just within the last 3 or 4 weeks, a lot more activity related to that because there was snow cover on the ground and things, so they were venturing around looking for food. Yeah,
yesterday's weather actually melting off that ice crust that had pretty much encased everything. So, yeah, that's right. All right, he's Bob Pollock. We're out of time already. How about that?
How about that?
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS AM 1160, 101.1.